Hi everyone, welcome to Scroll special vote Chori breakdown. We're just starting and we're waiting for people to come in. So we'll just give them a couple minutes and then we will jump right into the program along with our reporters Aryan and Ayush. So to remind you guys again, we're going to be discussing what vote chori is, how Scroll has reported on it, as well as the politics around allegations around vote rigging as part of the special live. Remember, Scroll has been covering this issue longer than almost any other media outlet, and certainly longer than political parties have kind of woken up to it. So we want to break this down for our readers in this special session. We'll be starting in a couple more minutes. We just want to wait for a few more people to join in. It's a Sunday afternoon, so people are a bit slow, I guess, to wake up to democratic decline. And we'll be up in a couple minutes. Cool. For anyone just joining, remember this is a live event. You can ask questions of our reporters. So, as and when you want to drop in a question, just put it into the question tab. And if we have time, we'll pick it up and lob it to Ayush and Aryan, and hopefully they can unpack it for you. We'll be repeating this a couple more times as people join. Let us now start. Cool. Vote Chori. So remember, this is the talk of the town now. It's what so much of Indian politics is based on. Indian political parties, especially the opposition, have been going to town alleging that elections are rigged in a substantial manner. The election commission is in on it. It is colluding with the ruling party. We've had public statements by Rahul Gandhi, opposition leader. He's been joined by other opposition parties in making these rather grave allegations, which say that Indian democracy is being undermined from the inside. Now, Scroll actually has been covering this topic before anyone actually woke up to it, before the media woke up to it, before opposition parties woke up to it. Around in early last year, when the general election was, when the campaigning for the general election was starting up, our executive editor Supriya Sharma was reporting on the ground, and she noticed a lot of chatter, especially in Uttar Pradesh, where voters told her that there were doubts around the voting process. Now, that is a troubling thing. If voters themselves are telling you that we don't trust how voting is taking place, we don't trust the umpires, so to speak. That's a troubling thing. Even if there might not necessarily be something wrong, or might or might not be anything wrong, but the fact that this impression exists in such a widespread way is troubling. So Supriya actually did a report on this way back in April 24, measuring people's reactions to this. And since then, Scroll has been on this like a watchdog. Before that, earlier in 2023, we'd actually covered a remarkable paper, an economics paper written by political scientist Sabyasachi Das. Sorry, written by economist Sabyasachi Das. It's a political economy paper. Again, this was remarkable. I had mentioned it. I had broken it down in my newsletter, the India Fix. It had taken me a lot of time to understand it. This was in 2023. Again, it had laid down a very interesting mechanism of how vote rigging takes place, and we're going to go deep into this. So we at Scroll have been covering this for a very long time, since 2023, way before this was picked up even by the opposition. So what we're going to try and do during this live is to sit with two of our reporters who've really dug deep into this issue, Ayush and Aryan, and we're going to help break down a lot of the elements of vote chori. We've covered all these elements in various reports for the last almost 2 years now, and we're going to try and distill some of that in this live. Couple of ground rules. This is going to last for around 30 minutes. It's going to be a conversation between me, Ayush, and Aryan. To repeat what I told you guys in the beginning, this is a live question and answer session with readers. So you can drop in your questions into the chat box, and hopefully, if we have time, we will get to them. Hi, Ayush. Hi, Aryan.
Hi.
Hi, good to be here.
Um, Sorry?
I said good to be here.
Right. Aryan, no such good to be yours.
Likewise. Likewise.
Right, likewise. Great. On that happy note, we will discuss something much more serious, which is uh, democratic decline in India. Uh, so I'm going to just lay out questions for the two of you, Ayush and Aryan. Whoever wants to jump in. Is going to be an informal kind of discussion. I want to start off with the big question. To use Rahul Gandhi's phrase, vote chori, election rigging. Uh, do you think it's happening in India at scale?
I think it's definitely happening. Whether it's happening at scale, I think is still too early to say, because we are a small newsroom. We have invested so many months into one story. For example, Kundarki, and that only allowed us to look at one small constituency. I think as time goes on, and as more journalists and media outlets start joining in, we might have a better idea. But so far, we do have evidence from a few Lok Sabha constituencies
Hmm.
in UP, in Bihar, in Karnataka, in other parts of the country. But that's just, I think, still just a few instances. So at scale, it's hard to say. But is it happening? Yes.
Right. And what is happening?
You have patterns of sort of new ways of capturing booths, almost as we reported last year, of
Hmm.
the booth level committees of political parties on the ground, of one political party's booth committee sort of laying siege on polling stations and not allowing people who are seen as voters of another political party vote, or people who are deleted from the voter lists based on how they vote or what their religious faith is.
Hmm.
Um, Another alarming instance has been Ireland, where we have seen these applications being filed for deletion of voters at such a
Hmm.
huge scale, which the Election Commission of India has admitted that they were filed. This is that the
Hmm.
voters were not deleted, but they are being filed by phone numbers of people outside the state of Karnataka. So uh, I think there is definitely an attempt to uh, tilt the field,
Hmm.
to favor one political party, but is has that compromised an election to a scale to a scale where, let's say, as some people argue that the last year's general elections were led to an illegitimate government? I think that is still unfounded.
Hmm. Cool. So basically, I want to like just break down sort of, and I completely agree. I think we should not get into this the complete scale of rigging, because honestly, it's difficult to determine that using journalistic practices. To some extent, I think if you go back to Das's paper, he kind of tries to do that using statistics, using maths, and that is one way to look at it. And that's a very it's a great way to look at it. But I think journalistic tools, that's a bit difficult to do, just given how we work, given our methodology. But one thing that we can do is describe how it's happening. That's something that journalism is great for. So I think one of the things that we should break down is, I think there are sort of, if you broadly break down vote rigging, election rigging into two sort of categories: what happens on election day and what happens before election day, right? So these are the two sort of big categories. Election day, as you said, Ayush, I think there is a tussle over who can vote and who cannot vote. And I think we'll come to a Kundarki report. I think we've seen widespread allegations that in Kundarki, in the bypoll in 2024, large numbers of Muslims are not allowed to vote. And as it so happens, most Muslims will not vote BJP in UP. So that's one thing. The other thing is the electoral roll, which is pre-election. The electoral roll is made months and years before the election. That is now coming under a lot of scrutiny. In fact, a lot of Rahul, the infamous Rahul Gandhi press conference from now a month or two back, that actually pointed to irregularities in the election roll, and something that's again something that our reporting has also pointed to, and we'll come to that. Again, we've done sort of a deep dive, a dipstick test into one by-election, one assembly election. We found some very unusual things happening in the electoral roll. So basically, just to point out to viewers, this is broadly, silos in which the two silos in which Scroll is looking at this, right? It's what is happening before the election, which includes things like the voter roll being made, and what is happening on election day. So these are the two things. One thing that I want to come to you guys, because when you're reporting, you are facing these allegations. Ayush is saying that there is some, there's some allegations of election rigging. Election rigging as an allegation, though, is honestly nothing very new, right? I think they've been made, you know, under Indira Gandhi, they've been made against, like there are even till today, the allegations say in states like West Bengal. Before that, in West Bengal itself, there were allegations against the CPIM and etc. etc. So, has anything you think changed, or this is just business as usual?
What has changed is that the focus has changed. I think till at least 2 3 years ago, a lot of election rigging conversation was happening around EVMs,
Hmm.
where political parties were alleging that it's somehow the machine has faults which can be exploited by a political
Hmm.
party, get more votes and have their candidate win. And of course, we had one MLA in Delhi even show that in the Delhi Assembly, Saurabh
Hmm.
Bhardwaj. But again, over the years, even former current election commissioners, a lot of senior politicians have also said that EVMs are actually fine, they're tamper proof.
Hmm.
But now the conversation has moved from EVMs. I think EVMs has gone. Now we are talking about electoral rolls. Is
Hmm.
that before an election or at the end of every year, when the electoral rolls are revised by the election commission,
Hmm.
people are added and deleted, right? That's a usual process. But is that also the point at which a certain political party can use their cadre or their influence on the state machinery to remove voters who do not favor them? And the second is, of course, as you said, um, voter suppression. It is on the
Hmm.
day of polling, what really goes on inside polling booths. Not so much in cities as we've seen, but in the rural areas, in villages which are not well connected or where the media or the cameras do not travel that frequently.
Hmm.
So you can see that when even in Rahul Gandhi's press conferences, no one's talking about EVMs anymore. You're talking about tech
Hmm.
being used to file deletion applications, electoral roll being manipulated. So that's the shift.
I think there's also this, it's getting increasingly difficult to decipher how, like, instances of the sort of rigging, in the sense that the use of technology, the use of,
Hmm.
using different systems from outside the state, using
Hmm.
uh, like, it's if I don't know, if booth capturing would have happened, it's still
Hmm.
easier to understand the process through which uh, the process was rigged, but through
Hmm.
divisions that people cannot figure out, or through additions, or form 7 being deleted by entities at 4 a.m., as that conference claimed, it's just increasingly difficult as journalists also for us to
Hmm.
sort of prove it or find what's happening. To understand that scape is more and more complex now. It's just additional layers on top of the earlier sort of process.
True, I think that's a great point, actually, Aryan. So I think no system is perfect, but usually when you're designing a system, uh, if you have a chance to design a system, you usually design a system in which when things go wrong, you come to know that they are wrong,
Yeah.
right? And that's a great way to fix a system. Now, I think a lot of the difference between vote rigging allegations earlier, and when I say earlier, you can go back, 50 years or something like that, were very easy to identify.
Yeah.
You knew that an election had been rigged. For example, there were widespread reports of, say, booth capturing once upon a time in places like Bihar. Again, like the way Ayush said, it usually happens in remote areas, this outright booth capturing, but you do know it's happening. It's literally happening. You can't not know that a booth has been captured. So that sort of thing, when it happens, it's easy to catch. Interestingly, all the allegations now are far more um, ephemeral, right? Like they're far more difficult to catch. I think what Aryan is saying. For example, a lot of the voter roll rigging things, you won't even know it's happening, right? In fact, in some cases, it seems that the people whose identities have been forged, they are also unaware that it is happening. That seems to be the case. So that is a really, in a way, I mean, they're both wrong, of course, but the latter case scenario is really, really dangerous, because if you don't know anything is wrong, you're never going to fix it. You're never going to be able to fix it, right? So that's important. Is the whole sunlight is the best disinfectant, kind of, that aphorism that is used. If you don't know that anything disinfected, one day you're just going to die. You're going to keel over and die, and you won't know that there's an illness in your body. You're never going to be able to treat it. So that is actually a very, very big thing that is happening nowadays. Just the finesse with which these allegations are being placed. We'll come to a lot of that earlier. One thing, you guys had mentioned is that uh, you guys had mentioned that a lot of what Scroll has done. We started quite early on this, and a lot of now the conversation has shifted from things like EVMs to other more sophisticated forms of, or allegations of vote rigging. How much has the rest of the Indian media managed to keep up with this?
I remember on the day of the Kundarki bypoll, that was November last year, when it was happening. A lot of the, because Kundarki is not far from Delhi, so a lot of the
Hmm.
television channels had traveled there, and
Hmm.
they could see voter suppression on camera on the day of the polling. Like you can still go and find videos of mainstream channels like Times on Bharat asking people to show their voter slips, and you can see it's not the voter slip that they are supposed to have. They have a voter slip which is given by the BJP at the booth. So in a lot of instances, if you, I think, travel there, the channels show that something is wrong, the police is not letting people in. But once that bypoll was over, from the next day onward, there was no conversation on what had happened on the day of polling. And then the BJP won, and most of the reporting was, oh, how did BJP sweep a Muslim majority constituency? This is then a lot of political sort of dissection happened, and everyone had a reason, but no one really said that there was a lot of There were a lot of allegations of voter suppression um, on the day of polling. And I mean, besides that, you hardly see any reporting. I mean, even forget the TV channels, but even
Hmm.
in newspapers, good newspapers who are
Hmm.
known for regular investigative stuff, are
Hmm.
not talking about voter lists, are not talking about voter suppression. So
Hmm.
you would see a next story like that in the Indian Express,
Hmm.
for example. So I think there's a lot of catching up to do in that sense.
True, and I think it's really, really important that the Indian media gets behind this. One is just how important it is. The second is just the scale of the issue, right? India is so huge, right? Uh, so, like for example, the Kundarki thing that we did. We've done a data analysis later, but our first reporting on it was literally just physical access. We went there and we put boots on the ground and we saw. So that's it's a scroll really, really small, so it's not possible for us to do that for many places, but we do have hundreds of media organizations in the country. So theoretically it is very, very possible to do. It's just that newsrooms need to realize what is important and what is not, in some ways. I want to quickly go to, since we've discussed Kundarki a couple times, I want to actually just go to Kundarki and just go to the first chart. Maybe Kanika, if you could just take us to the first chart. And I just want to, for our viewers who maybe not followed our reporting till now and are joining, I want to just show you guys what is happening here. Cool. So, I want to just break down. This is a report that Aryan and Ayush had done around a month back. Now look at this chart. It's super interesting. So we've done a report in. So just to break it down, in Kundarki, which is an assembly election in Uttar Pradesh, that the seat in which it was, in the Lok Sabha election, the BJP hadn't done very well there. But suddenly, a few months later, when the assembly by election took place in November 2024, the BJP actually won that seat, and this is a Muslim majority seat, right? Now, that's a very interesting thing. Muslims are not seen to vote for the BJP in very large numbers in Uttar Pradesh, but somehow it seems like in Kundarki this changed. Now, at that time, a lot of as people would call it, Godi media went with a lot of theories that there was some caste composition, some Muslims were voting BJP, this that. But we saw a very, very interesting kind of pattern when we looked at the data. First when we went in November 24, we saw large scale allegations. Ayush reported on that, and we saw large scale allegations where Muslims said they weren't physically allowed to go to the booth. And we saw that in the data also. Now look at this chart, for example. If you look at the orange bar, that is the BJP's vote share in the Lok Sabha election when you map it to the Muslim population in a booth. Now, as expected, as the number of Muslims go up, the BJP's vote share falls. So till May 2024, Muslims in Kundarki were not voting for the BJP. This suddenly, in the span of 6 months, drastically changed. Now, if you look at the purple line, for example, that's the assembly share. Now, what's happening here is that we're seeing that the BJP vote share barely changes when you map it to the Muslim population share in a booth, right? So that's a very interesting thing, and that really can be very well explained by the fact that there was a lot of voter suppression on that day. Muslims were just not allowed to go to the booth and vote. So it's only basically BJP voters who were allowed to go to the booth and vote. So that's why vote share kind of remained constant. If you see later, the turnout also falls in booths where Muslims are higher in percentage. So this is the sort of reporting that we've done. This is a sort of deep dive that we've done, and this is really something that the election commission should come out and explain, and just break down as to why we're seeing such unusual data patterns, which is also backed up by voices from the ground. I want to come to the election commission. Uh, since we've spoken about it, you guys have reported quite a bit on vote rigging. You guys have followed obviously the election commission. What do you guys see as, when it comes to the attitude of the election commission? Some very grave allegations are being made. Is the election commission being able to meet them head on?
Um, well, just to give an example, we were supposed to be at the press conference of the election commission last week after it finished the SIR to announce the Bihar election. They had a press conference in Delhi, and I have been to several press conferences that the ECI has done since last year. But this time when I went there, we were not allowed to go in, and the reason given was that we need PIB accreditation, basically the government stamp that
Mm-hmm.
we are journalists. So um, they only allowed those people who had this accreditation to get in, and then people who did not have that accreditation, you had a separate list, and if your name was on this list, so they were filtering the process of the number of the sort of journalists who can reach a press conference. So that tells you a lot. It's sort of unprecedented. We spoke to a lot of old timers who had arrived there who
Mm-hmm.
did not go in, and they said this has happened for the first time. They had been covering election commission for decades, so that encapsulates their attitude, that their willingness to sort of avoid hard questions. But when there are hard questions, we see very sort of pugnacious tweets that are tweeted out by the election commission always after our stories come out. So we do reach out to the election commission when we have a story and we want their comments, and we send them emails. We call up our sources, but we hardly hear from them. It's only once that story is out, and I think then they realize that the story is doing well, will you see them responding to these stories, and even their responses. For example, we had done one story on how soon after the SIR was announced, and
Mm-hmm.
after a month's work, the election commission released the draft roll. And for the first week, that draft roll was in a machine readable format, so we could easily analyze it in a very short span of time to tell the problems
Mm-hmm.
in. And as soon as the stories started coming out, they replaced the machine readable format roles with non-machine readable. So that made our our jobs 10, 20 times harder, because these documents
Mm-hmm.
are not searchable. You have to do a lot of work to make them, to process them and analyze them. And when we just pointed this out, that they had changed this format, the UPC, I think Bihar's chief electoral officer tweeted on our story and said that the draft rolls are exactly as we had uploaded them. No changes have been made in the draft roll. But the point was, we are not saying the draft roll has been changed. We are saying the format of the draft roll, in which way it's available to the public, has been changed. So it's a sort of a straw man. They are basically trying to refute an argument we did not make. So that is the attitude that the election commission seems to be taking. Aryan, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, it's broadly the same thing. It's just that even when they respond, the response is not, at least seemingly not coming from a place of taking responsibility. Instead, is coming from a place of aggression almost. That somebody like a Rahul Gandhi, if being the leader of the opposition, doing multiple press conferences, instead of taking it up, the responses are very like it's making the process of accountability difficult for people than easier. Like what you suggested
Mm-hmm.
from the draft, looking at those roles. And for example, something as simple as multiple house numbers having the same, like multiple people having the same house numbers being reported on. Now it's not, you can't just say that it's fake people, but it
Mm-hmm.
deserves to, you can at least say that we're looking at our voter rolls. That
Mm-hmm.
response is missing from the ECI completely, and that's worrying the way they sort of respond.
Cool. I want to, we'll continue our discussion, but I want to go to a couple of questions that people have put in. One is, uh, there is, with someone with the username Stock Signal has said, "What is happening in India is terrible. If we lost our votes, we have nothing to live for in this already dying democracy." Um, right. So this is an interesting response. It's a bit of a It's a bit of a, if I could classify, as almost defeatist response. And we'll come to our reporters later. But the interesting thing about this, really, I think that our viewers should also understand is how contested this entire process is, right? So it is not that there is someone sitting at the top and just clicking their fingers and a vote, an election is being flipped. The process is far more complicated, actually, and sometimes complication is good, because those are checks and balances in the system. So, for example, if you go to Rahul Gandhi's press conference, in theory, it is possible to, of course, go through voter rolls and find out issues in the voter roll. Of course, the sort of practical aspect of that is opposition parties in India don't have a lot of money, and which means that they don't have a lot of manpower on the ground. So that's it's difficult to do, but it's not that it's impossible to do. So I want you guys to break down, what are some of the things in the Indian election system, in our system, that sort of mitigate against this sort of fraud. What are the checks?
I think if on the election commission website anyone can go and find these documents. One of them is called the manual on electoral rolls, which lays out over 200-300 pages of how voter lists are supposed to be changed, how people are supposed to be added and deleted,
Hmm.
which tells us that there's a very, very good procedure in place. And if you go through it, it is quite a good procedure. So we have a good process in place. We have, when we started doing these set of stories, you can go and find on a website in your neighborhood 10 years ago how people were voting. Like there is booth wise breakdown of every constituency in this country, and that data is available online. How many people at that booth voted for which party? um, this is the sort of data regime, the transparency that allows us to make sure that we know, even if there is some funny business happening in the electoral rolls or if there is some voter suppression, this is the data, publicly available data, that we can always use to then study it, flag it, and the election commission can then, it's not happened in a long time, but there was like few decades ago, entire elections were countermanded, right? In the 90s, 1991, the entire Bihar election was countermanded because the election commission felt that the process was not fair.
Hmm.
So the fact that you can point out errors by using this sort of information is in its own way a very good advantage to especially journalists and researchers and even economists like Sabyasachi Das, who's also used the same data to make his case.
Yep. One thing that I wanted to come to, I'm going to come to other user questions in a bit, reader questions in a bit. One thing that I want to come to is just look a bit, go back, jump back into our reporting. So, how do you guys decide which election is to be analyzed? So, for example, there have been some questions raised. For example, asking why Scroll has not looked at the allegations that the Congress has raised around Maharashtra. The Congress has also raised a lot of allegations around the previous assembly election in Maharashtra, and Scroll hasn't done a story on that. Um, but we've covered allegations in Kundarki. What's our breakdown for this?
So when we started reporting the Lok Sabha election, our sort of idea was that the middle of an election, there are videos coming out of voters being beaten and thrown out of polling stations. Okay, where is this happening? Let's go to the ground and let's report on this. So a lot of what we were doing back then was we were reacting to things that were happening over the year. I think we've had a learning curve, and now what we try to do instead is we look at data, we analyze data, we extract parts. We spend days. Me and Aryan have spent countless nights on extracting data from certain elections that have happened, and also we are trying to now look at elections that will happen, that we suspect can, are sort of open to manipulation. And once we look at this data, I think what we do is then we hit the ground. So that has been our strategy in Kundarki. What we had done, we were on the ground, and then we heard the allegations of voters after elections and people saying that the police had participated in widespread voter suppression, and then we took a year to sort of take out, extract data, file RTIs, and then point out how we can find irregularities in the voting process. So that is broadly the way we do it.
Got it. I'm going to go to another reader question. Jen called Gautam Dalvi has asked an interesting question. I think it is mapping to Kundarki. How are you counting mapping in missing voters as per list of actually mentioned finalist? So I think what Mr. Dr. Dalvi is asking us is in Kundarki we've done a lot of demographic breakdown of the voter list. We've classified voters into Hindu and Muslim. Could you help break down for our readers how that is done? How do we do it?
Right. So for Kundarki, what we do is first we take out all our data. We go
Mhm.
to the voter rolls, get those voter rolls. That scraping itself is like a task. That's the first thing, that you get all the IDs, all the names, do all that cleaning. Once that is done, these voter lists have rounds of additions and deletions that happen
Mhm.
between the SSR, or between the last election and now. There have been multiple rounds of additions, 3 rounds, I think, right? So we did. So each round, then we analyze how people were added. We get out that data of how many people were added, how many were deleted per booth, and then we run a software on it. This is a software that we've used earlier, and we've tried and tested it, and it's a Harvard software. It's Harvard. Are you sure? It's Berkeley. Sorry, I'm just. But then we run. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's Cambridge. It's published in the Cambridge Journal, but it's available in the Harvard directory.
Right. So we
Mhm.
use that, and it has this option of sort of tuning your data to understand when it's capturing Muslims and non-Muslim names. So then we run that process through all voter rolls, so like nearly 3 lakh people, and then
Mhm.
get our findings through that to see.
And
And this is, just to explain, this is a very sophisticated process that we're doing to understand the demography of the voter roll. Because we've seen allegations that BJP voters or non-BJP voters are being targeted. Now the thing is, this would be so much easier to do if we had machine readable rolls, right? But we don't have them. Voter rolls by the election commission are intentionally made non-machine readable, right? Which it's is a very unusual thing for the election commission to do. Like there is no great reason why it should do them. Voter rolls in India, they are a public document. You can access them. Parties can access them, but somehow the election commission wants to prevent anyone analyzing them. Now there are very few reasons why the election commission would do them, and very few good reasons why election commission would do this. Unfortunately, you should want transparency in a democracy, and if the election commission has nothing to hide, they should be open. Ayush, go off.
Uh, I'm saying, Dr. Dalvi, you can even look at the missing voters or deleted voters where you live. You have to go to a website called voters.eci.gov.in. You can download your own voter list. And on the last page of every voter list in this country, there's a summary. Number of people who've been added, number of people that have been deleted, in which month, names of the people who've been added, and names of the people who've been deleted. And you can easily figure out who's entering the voter roll and leaving. This is all public information. In Kundarki, what we see is that in voter lists in Muslim villages, a lot of people who are being deleted are Muslims. In villages where the BJP gets very good votes, very few people are being deleted.
Mhm.
So there's a pattern there. But anyone and living anywhere can just look at the deletion and addition, like just couple of mouse clicks.
Cool. Okay, we've crossed 40 minutes. We're running at the end of our time. I want to end off with the Bihar SIR. The Bihar elections are in a month. I think they're starting on the 6th, so almost in a month. You guys have reported from Bihar on the SIR. I want you to break down what you guys saw And what are your impressions now as people who reported on it now that the final list is out?
Hmm. Uh, okay. So I think when we went on the ground, a few things really stood out for us. Is that despite the claim that there are these many number of BLOs, that this is happening, daily updates on how many people have filled their forms, the act in as you went to uh, if I should say caste, if as you went down the order of sort of social disadvantage or marginalization, you'd see more lack of information. So first of all, a lot of the people removed, a very high chunk of the people removed are Musahars, for example. Musahar
Right.
is highly disadvantaged community, and when we go there, a lot of people do not know that their names have been cut, that their sons' names have gone.
Mm,
A lot of them are migrants, of course, that sort of thing. So then they're out there, they don't have their forms. So then
mm,
the final, we don't know if those people made it back. Then the second, for example, the people hit most after are women, and they're facing this sort of double whammy, where first there is a lack of information, but on the other hand, women who are married are getting their names cut in the current village and in their father's village. So it's just a sort of they're nowhere right now, and then they have to get proofs from back home, which in itself is in a place of no agency becomes even more difficult. So yeah, I think these are the two groups of people that are really at a difficult sort of place. But Ayush, if you
interesting.
want to add something.
So basically, there is a big stratification by gender and caste in Bihar. That's how the SIR is working.
Yeah, and when this started, a lot of people were so speculating whether this is meant to give the NDA an advantage, the ruling party and the alliance an advantage.
Mm,
But as Aryan pointed out, this is disadvantaging women voters. Like
mm,
the number of registered women voters has fallen dramatically in Bihar,
mm,
and these are voters who are voting for Nitish Kumar and for the BJP. So
mm,
in the end, it's almost seems like that if women, and this is a fact, if women are more disadvantaged, that will harm, at least statistically should harm the NDA more than it should for the opposition
the
alliance.
opposition. Yeah, and I think we've come a full circle because when you're talking about the checks and balances of the Indian system, I think again the Indian state is so chaotic and complex that it's maybe the BJP wanted to do something with the SIR, but the final outcome is it's complex. It's not that easy to do. On that note, I think we'll call an end to this live. We will be back with more such discussions around Scrolls reporting. I think it's important for us to reach out to our readers and to interact with people who are reading Scroll. Remember, if you want to continue to, if you want us to continue to do this journalism, if you want to support investigations like this, if you want to support the interrogation of our democracy, if you want to support good journalism, support Scroll and go to scroll.in/contribute so that we can continue to do the work that we do. Thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have for this program.